Molly Q's Adventure, written by Robert Charles, illustrated by Gordon Neely. Molly Q's Adventure. Alright, so table of contents. Meet Molly Q. Molly starts out the trench. Molly gets sucked in the ocean surface. Molly on the rise, water vapor. Molly condensed, life in a cloud. Molly precipitates, raining and pouring. Molly runs, the river. Molly completes her cycle back to the sea, and glossary. Meet Molly Q. How would you describe your life? Straight and wide like a highway? Does it go up and down like a roller coaster? My life is a cycle. No matter where I venture, no matter what I accomplish, eventually I find myself right back where I started. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Molly Q. Just plain Molly to my friends. You have seen me, and billions just like me, every time it rains, or you turn on your faucet. I'm a water molecule. Get it? Molly Q, molecule. Did you notice my name, Molly Q? Molecule. Get it? A molecule is the smallest part of something that's still the same thing. More important, me and my kind are everywhere. You are comprised mostly of water. 60% of you is, in fact, water. Your parents are mostly water. Your friends and acquaintances are mostly water. The President of the United States and the Vice President and his pet Schnauzer and the entire lawn in front of the White House are mostly water. Every living thing on this planet is mostly water. You might think that being a water molecule is boring, but just wait until I tell you about my adventures on my last cycle. Molly starts out the trench. The odd thing about living in a cycle is that it's hard to know where you began. One moment you're completing something, and the next you're starting over. So I'm starting the story under the sea. I was in liquid water, way down near the bottom of a deep sea trench. It was extremely dark and frigid, with more than 10 kilometers of water above us. Since there are more than 1.5 billion trillion molecules in a drop of water, you could say I had a lot of company. My friends huddled close together, and we had very little energy, so we didn't move much. Because there were so many molecules above us, there was a lot of pressure. I know it's not likely that you'll ever spend time in an ocean trench, but let me say that it's a different world. There are hordes of weird looking creatures swimming around and crawling along the ocean floor. Since no light can penetrate that deep, it's dark all the time. Some animals had no eyes at all. Some of them had even adapted to carry their own light, which I thought was pretty smart. They don't use the light to see necessarily. The light attracts tiny creatures they can eat. Luckily, I didn't get swallowed, at least not then. I was getting accustomed to this environment when one day I accidentally floated over an ocean vent spewing hot gas. If I'd been on the surface, I would have boiled away in the scalding water around that gas. Fortunately, the pressure in the trench is high enough to keep water from boiling. There's something about that spewing heat, though. I began to feel agitated and started rising from the depths. As I drifted upward, the pressure diminished and things became brighter. I moved around more and took up more space. Meanwhile, the environment was shifting and changing. The animals looked completely different. Molly gets sucked in the ocean's surface. I was floating in the ocean with all my molecule friends, thoroughly enjoying my surroundings. I was near the tropics, and life was good. Quite unexpectedly, the lights went out. Another major catastrophe struck just as I was beginning to enjoy life again. A whale had sucked me into his blowhole. I really didn't want to spend an eternity in this huge mammal's blowhole. Then, all of a sudden, the creature broke through the surface, produced a big honking sound, and blew my friends and me right out of the blowhole on top of his head, like the most enormous sneeze you've ever experienced. I rocketed into the air, flipped repeatedly, and landed on the surface of the ocean stunned. I quickly realized that things were looking up. There was no pressure to worry about. Certainly nothing like at the bottom of the trench. Just bright and warm water. The sun was beating down, and as you know, when I heat up, I get energized. Molly on the rise. Water vapor. I was warmer and more energetic than ever. I didn't know what had gotten into me. I was flitting all over the surface. One day, with the sun directly overhead, I experienced such a powerful surge of energy that I literally shot out of the water. I evaporated. I was no longer liquid. I was gas. Water vapor, they call it. This was a strange, unusual, and lonely. For the first time in several years, I had no friends crowding around me. I could spot the others who had evaporated, but we were much further away from each other than when we were a liquid. As with each new phase, I became accustomed to being a gas and checked out the new environment. It was nice floating over the ocean and feeling so light and airy. I kept rising higher and higher, and the view kept improving. I could see some of my friends in liquid form below. I began to relax and enjoy my new status as a gas molecule. After all, floating around in the atmosphere, drifting along on the warm sea breezes, could be a leisurely life. As you can now imagine, this did not last forever. Nothing ever does it? As with every other phase in my life, things began to change. One day I was leaning back, enjoying the breeze and trying to conjure up a few choice descriptive words for the time when I would get back together with my friends. Barely aware, I noticed what appeared to be land. The land was approaching rapidly, and I could see it was getting steep and rocky. Before I could think up the word balmy, the no longer balmy breeze slammed me into the side of the mountain. Good thing I was water vapor. If I had been the water in a ripe tomato or an overweight rhinoceros, I would have been a mess. Molly condensed, life in a cloud. Up the side of the mountain we went, gaining altitude, getting cooler, my energy drained away. As things slowed and cooled, my friends and I huddled together. We were definitely no longer a gas, but liquid again. We had condensed on a speck of dust floating in the air, becoming a water droplet. Moreover, we were not the only ones. Every water vapor molecule in sight was condensing. As the droplets formed, we began to bunch together, blotting out the sun. With a shock, I realized that we had become a cloud, a giant, billowy white cloud. I was hanging out with my friends, enjoying life as a couch potato, lying on my speck of dust. But I was destined for another change. Nothing stays the same. We were drifting along, enjoying the warm air mass that was carrying us. With no warning, we met up with a colder air mass moving down from the north. This mass was colder than we were. Scooped us up. It scooped under us and sent us shooting into the atmosphere. As we went higher, more water droplets joined the cloud. We were growing into an enormous, dark thunderhead. The air cooled, and we began to huddle together again, hanging on to each other for dear life. Molly precipitates, raining and pouring. Some of my truly unlucky friends got caught in a mini cycle. They started to fall as raindrops and were blown up by an updraft and froze. They tumbled down through the cloud and they became coated by more raindrops. When they were blown back up again, this went on, building up more and more coats of ice until they got heavy, so heavy that gravity pulled them to earth. They fell, exhausted, crashing to the ground as hail. They created quite a ruckus smashing down. Meanwhile, I hung out with some water molecule pals near the bottom of the thunderhead. As time passed, we started colliding more frequently. Soon, we became rather large, heavy. Water drop. No longer able to stay aloft. We were pulled downward by gravity. We became precipitation. Gazillions of raindrops falling to the earth in a rainstorm. It was fun to have so many friends around again. Our raindrop got really big, and we met molecules that we hadn't seen before. We all enjoyed the trip down. We accelerated as we fell, gaining more and more speed as we approached the ground. All of a sudden, splat! We crashed down in the middle of a pasture on a hillside, where lots of sheep and cows were grazing. We lay there stunned for just a moment. Some of my molecule friends began to soak into the ground. "See you later," they shouted as the ground absorbed them. "We're headed for the aquifer. Soon we'll be groundwater." Molly runs the river. My friends and I, however, chose the surface water route. We flowed down the hillside as runoff, tumbling end over end. We rolled over the ground, picking up dirt particles, and even carrying some small pebbles and rocks with us. We helped erode a few gullies along the way. We formed a small rivulet. Soon our unique stream joined a few other streams, and eventually we became a slow, meandering river. Water molecules from all over the river's watershed found their way to this mighty river. Each group brought some dirt and rock sediment they had collected from the land. I learned a lot and made many friends. Every day, millions of water molecules would evaporate off the surface. Many more evaporated on sunny days when they became energized by the sun's rays. Animals drinking at the river's edge slurped some of us up. Of course, that was just a detour, since those molecules would end up back in the river after passing through their host. The worst things were the factory intake pipes along the river's path. Factories along the river would suck us up, use us to cool their machines, then spit us out into the river again. If we were lucky, evaporation took the others. I continued my journey downstream. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. One day, salt molecules began joining us. At first, they weren't very many, but soon they were crowding all around us. It reminded me of my ocean beginnings. Molly completes her cycle back to the sea. Sure enough, there I was at the mouth of the river entering the ocean. I had left over a year ago, and here I was, back in my own backyard. All of us water molecules began to slow down, and the sediment we carried began settling out and drifting to the bottom of the river. I flowed through the river delta formed by thousands of years of sediment deposit. I traveled further and farther from the shore. It was good to be back in this familiar, more pleasant, and decidedly cleaner environment. I caught an ocean current heading west, leaned back, kicked up my feet, and began to dream of my next adventure. In a cycle, life is always changing and bringing new adventures. I imagined the epic tale I would relate to my friends if we ever met again. If Even if we didn't, there would always be a new water molecule to meet. After all, there are more of us than anyone could count in a lifetime. As cool water around me began to draw me back down into an ocean trench, I reflected upon my latest adventure. This cycle was fun. Each cycle is a little different, even though it has similar phases. Now I could only be left to wonder where the next adventure would take me. The